has finally been born. Black butterfly, sail across the waters. Tell your sons and daughters what the struggle brings.
Hi everyone, welcome to the community classroom. This is Dr. Tracy McCarthy, psychologist, attorney, and educator, and we are addressing the question of whether Kanye West is right or wrong regarding his comments related to the Constitution of the United States of America. One of the things that happens often is that when Kanye West opens his mouth is that many people assume that whenever he opens his mouth that something wrong is bound to sort of fall out, that there's something wrong with whatever it is that he says. And this is particularly the case when he makes comments regarding the social climate of the world, or he makes comments regarding history, politics, psychology, law, media, education, anything particularly related to slavery. And so we're going to look to see if he is totally wrong, slightly wrong, or possibly right about anything that he has said related to this 13th Amendment issue. One of the things that happens often for people is that they make assumptions that knowledge and intellect come with a college degree, or that such is a prereq for having an IQ or having intellect at all. And so there have been comments about, Kanye should not speak because he doesn't have a college degree. He dropped out of college. And you are cautioned about making those sorts of assumptions. And we talked about this related to the debates that have been going on, because there's often this sense that the person who sounds the most intellectually astute is the person who is right, or the person with the highest degree is the person who is right. But it is actually possible for the homeless person to be right versus the CEO with the MBA. It's possible for the grandmother who's 95 years old with a 5th grade education to be right when the college professor is wrong. It's possible for the student to be right and the teacher wrong, the patient to be right and the doctor wrong. It's possible for the congregant to be right and the preacher wrong. One of the things that Deniece Williams talks about in relation to the song Black Butterfly is this idea that without a struggle, it's impossible for a person to reach their overall human potential. And often the quick, easy answer is not always the best answer in terms of reaching that potential, in terms of realizing that human truth. And so sometimes making those snap judgments, or even being helped out of a particular situation, may serve to forestall a person's actual growth. And so we're going to go behind those initial reactions that a lot of people have to Kanye, and we're going to go behind the form of Kanye, and we're going to look at the substance of what it is that he is talking about. And sometimes people can't hear what Kanye is talking about because they get blinded by the sight. So they see Kanye, they can't see behind Kanye, they can't see behind that form to get to the substance. They will focus on, how he's dressed, they'll focus on who he's married to, they'll focus on, what hat he's wearing, all of that sort of stuff that goes on with him. And so what we're going to do now, though, is we're going to struggle through this question about the 13th Amendment, and we're going to get to the substance of what he is saying, and we're going to analyze that. We are not going to concern ourselves with the form. We're not going to concern ourselves with the form of him or the trappings of him. We're just going to look at the statements that have been made regarding the Constitution. And so as we proceed, the question for you to ask yourself is, was Kanye right regarding the 13th Amendment? What do you actually think? Should it be abolished? Do you know what the 13th Amendment actually says?
The promise was unkept, but your faith was assured.
Now we are going to look at the actual 13th Amendment. We're going to look at the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. We're going to look at the issue of legal discrimination. But before we get to those things, we are going to first look at snippets regarding the comments. We're going to look at some of the commentary from Kanye West, and then we're going to look at some of the responses to the comments. And you can see by the time frame that some of the comments came very quickly. And so that suggests that there was not a response, but there was a lot of reacting going on in relation to his commentary. And so we're going to first look at the first comment, and it's sort of cut off because we want to focus only on the 13th Amendment. It's over on the right-hand side, upper corner there. And Kanye West comments that we will provide jobs for all who are free from prisons as we abolish the 13th Amendment. And then he says, message sent with love. And so that's the first comment, and that is the comment that garnered the greatest response. So you had 123,000 people liking it, but there's another component to this statement, and so it's not clear whether they were liking that part or they were liking the part that came before it. So he was talking about employment, and you had several people talking about this. And so when he made a clarifying statement about an hour and a half later, he stated the 13th Amendment is slavery in disguise, meaning it never ended. And then he says, we are the solution that heals. I do want to add something. Kanye West is almost like a test. And the test is how quickly people respond. And you can tell a lot about a person and the way they process information by the way they respond to Kanye West, actually. And so there's often a visceral gut reaction to the things that Kanye says. And there's also an acceptance of snippets or sound bites from Kanye. And so therefore people often don't have the totality of whatever it is that he has said in order to put things into proper context. And so often people are responding to sound bites or little tweets or things like that. And so there's often context missing, and then people will then tend to spread, some of that reacting, and then other people will take it on and then react to the reactions versus going back to the source. And so we are actually going to look at the 13th Amendment as indicated, but we're going to look at some of these responses or reactions. And let's start with CNN. And so CNN comments that Kanye West is, stirring more outrage with his comment about the 13th Amendment. And CNN is under the impression that the 13th Amendment was ratified to free slaves and end slavery. So we have that reaction there. We have Wanda Sykes, who makes the comment that she thinks it's time that everyone just head down to their local precinct and file a restraining order on this. Now, she is a comedian, but she says, help her Lord, when dealing with this troubled individual. She goes on to say that she doesn't know about everybody else, but she doesn't want this quote unquote fool around her, anywhere near her. And so that's one reaction. And you have another person who reacted with, what the blank are you talking about? With an exclamation mark, question mark there. Another person says, I just need explicit confirmation. This person wants to know that Kanye West knows what the word abolish means, and she wants to know whether or not Kanye West actually knows what the 13th Amendment actually says. Another person, I can see this person's name is Malcolm Nance, and Malcolm Nance refers to Kanye as an idiot and believes that this statement is calling for the reinstatement of slavery in America. And then offers that he believes that Kanye West should think before he speaks and he should read before he thinks, and he puts that in quotation marks. Another individual, Cornell William Brooks, indicated that Kanye West is a slave descendant millionaire. He's lawfully married as a black man to a white woman, and he's the beneficiary of the 13th Amendment. And then he offered that he believes that Kanye West should read and rap and record the story of the amendment that freed 4 million slaves. And then actor Chris Evans, Captain America, goes into overdrive, and he states that he finds it, maddening debating with someone that he perceives does not know history, doesn't read books, and that frames their myopia as virtue. And Chris Evans went on to state that he finds the level of unapologetic conjecture frustrating, retrogressive, unprecedented, and absolutely terrifying. And so Kanye West's comment, of course, touches on that intersection. That is my intersection, which is psychology and law. And I also received commentary from people asking, have you heard what Kanye West said? Can you believe it? He's at it again. And when asked, well, what did he say? There was the sharing of the comment about the 13th Amendment. And my response was, well, have you actually read the 13th Amendment? Are you aware of what the 13th Amendment says? And if you are aware, then what's your understanding of his comment in that context? And pretty much what happens is that individuals will admit that they really have not read the 13th Amendment. They believe something about the 13th Amendment based upon what they learned in school, and they really haven't revisited the 13th Amendment since perhaps 3rd or 4th grade. And so we are going to revisit it. Now, as promised, before we go on to the 13th Amendment, we're going to discuss the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. And some might argue that these amendments have more weight and teeth than even the 13th Amendment. And we're going to look at why that might be the case. Most importantly, we're going to look at developing some skills regarding reading laws and understanding the nuance of laws so that you can have a better understanding of not just the 13th Amendment, the 14th and the 5th Amendment, but other laws that are out there that you're trying to understand. One of the problems, however, is that people will often listen to people who are sort of holding themselves out as sort of social media lawyers, and they might get misled because a person might misunderstand the law and the minutia that is entailed in some of the language of the laws. And so we're going to look at some of that minutia today to help you better understand how this whole thing works here. And so with the 5th Amendment and the 14th Amendment, everyone knows that these are about equal protection. And so there is a focus on the equal protection issues. And there is often a missing of the nuance of the laws. And so people tend to think that these are about their rights and guaranteeing their rights. But there's another way to look at this law or these laws. One of the things that is going on here is that it's not just about not being deprived of life, liberty, and property. What the 5th Amendment in particular is saying is that you actually can deprive someone of life, liberty, and property. You simply have to use due process of law to achieve that. Many people also believe that private property can't be taken by the government, but in fact, it can be taken. You've heard of eminent domain. There's just that little caveat that there just must be just compensation. And so private property can actually be taken. Another confusing dynamic for some people is this idea of providing equal protection under the law in terms of the states. And so individuals will believe that everyone has the power to call for this equal protection of the law, this right to due process, but really it's related to people who are within the jurisdiction of a particular state. And so it's not as if someone can just assert this right when they are not under that jurisdiction. So someone from Paris cannot assert that right in Oklahoma, for instance. And one of the things that's also important to remember is that the government is actually allowed to discriminate against individuals as long as the discrimination satisfies this analysis known as the equal protection analysis. And sometimes people don't know that, and so they believe that there is this strict interpretation of this idea of you cannot discriminate, but that interpretation actually has all sorts of loopholes. And really what it is saying is that you can basically discriminate as long as you fulfill the test. You pass the test, the equal protection analysis test, then you actually can discriminate. So we'll look at a couple of examples, in terms of how this can take place. And before we get to the 13th Amendment, let's quickly go over what's known as the BFOQ. And the BFOQ is basically the bona fide occupational qualifications sort of test. And what this does is it actually allows employers to hire people actually based upon their age, their race, their sex, their national origin, or their religion. And so what this does is basically it allows that sort of circumventing of the equal protection. It circumvents all of those ideas about not having discrimination in the hiring process. And so basically what generally happens is that an employer simply proves that there is a bona fide occupational need for a particular age, a particular sex, a particular race, national origin, or religion to do the particular job. It is an occupational requirement. Now we're going to actually look at the 13th Amendment. So we've looked at the 5th Amendment, we've looked at the 14th Amendment, and we see that those are very important amendments. And we're going to look at the 13th Amendment because this is the one that people believe, has all of the teeth. And so we're going to answer the question, does it actually outlaw slavery in America? And of course, we have to actually look at it to see if it does that. And so these are little pieces of the recommendation, the resolution for the 13th Amendment. And of course, in this debate, you have CNN in one corner saying that this particular amendment ended slavery. And then you have Kanye West saying, no, it did not. And Kanye West is actually saying this is a disguise for slavery. And then you, of course, have Malcolm Nance referring to Kanye as an idiot because he believes that Kanye West asking for the abolition of the 13th Amendment, he believes that this is actually asking for a reinstatement of slavery. And so we're going to look to see if CNN is right, or Malcolm Nance is right, or Chris Evans is right, Wanda Sykes. We're going to look to see if all of these people are right, or is Kanye West right? Now let's look at these issues related to the 13th Amendment and answer this question. Kanye West seems to think that the 13th Amendment serves as just a smokescreen for slavery. However, CNN, again, they argue that the 13th Amendment was ratified in 1865 and that the crux of this amendment was that it actually abolished slavery. And you have another commenter who said, they really want Kanye West to explain whether he knows what the word abolish means and whether or not he has actually read the 13th Amendment. And so we're going to look at these issues to see if we can come to some understanding about why Kanye West made this statement and why other people might be seeing this in a different vein. And so one of the things that happens is that when people think about the 13th Amendment, they've been taught to believe that the 13th Amendment actually abolished slavery. And so what they see and hear and remember is that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist within the United States. What happens, however, is they miss the words that are in between the lines. They, don't read between the lines. And between the lines of the 13th Amendment, what you will see is that slavery was never abolished with the 13th Amendment. Just like the 5th and 14th Amendment, what the 13th Amendment did was it gave the prescription for the circumstances under which you can enslave someone. And so basically a person convicted of a crime can be enslaved or made to serve in terms of involuntary servitude. And it's important to note that this is not about major crime. It's just crime, so a person can be convicted, duly convicted of a crime, and then slavery can take place, or involuntary servitude can actually take place based upon the 13th Amendment. And so what really should have happened when people heard the comment coming from Kanye, what should have happened is that people should have taken it upon themselves to actually read the 13th Amendment, because it does, on its face sound like an outrageous statement to make publicly. And so what would have been the wise thing to do, CNN, would have been to actually read the 13th Amendment to get some understanding, to see if there is any validity in terms of what Kanye West was saying. Instead, people reacted versus responding. And they reacted in a way that did not facilitate having conversation about this amendment. Instead, it actually shut down conversation. And so many people remained in the dark regarding the statement. They remained in the dark regarding the realities of the 13th Amendment, and left the dynamic with Kanye with a sense of self-righteousness about their beliefs about the 13th Amendment, and their beliefs about him being wrong about the 13th Amendment. And all this came about because people have been miseducated about the 13th Amendment, and then people have not questioned that miseducation, CNN. And so in the future, as with, the conversations we've had about some issues in history, and then even responding to questions regarding, is Dane Calloway right? One of the things it's important to do is simply do your own research. If somebody says something that sounds outrageous to you, they've been researching something, they come away with a theory that does not comport with what you actually believe, look into it yourself. And when it comes to the law, make sure that you read all of the words and that you understand exactly what it is saying, because sometimes those nuances can be the turning point in terms of the law. So when you see words like shall or may, those words are very powerful and they have specific meaning. And so you want to make sure you're understanding the language of the law, and you're understanding all of the nuances of the law. And when it comes to Kanye West, it's important to not always react, but respond, and sometimes think about what it is that he is saying or anyone is saying before having an automatic negative gut reaction to everything.
So the ages wheels of time can catch your wings.
So now in the future, when this conversation comes up about the 13th Amendment, you can actually have a little bit more information to engage that conversation. If you didn't have that information already, you might already have that information. And so you can start to think about it for yourself. Should this be abolished? Does it even matter that there is or is not a 13th Amendment? And you can also, at this point, you can know what the 13th Amendment actually says. And I encourage you to actually spend some time with the Constitution, read that Constitution, and, get a real good feel for what is really going on in terms of the Constitution. And coming up next, we are going to have a part 2 regarding this discussion, regarding this 13th Amendment and the use of crime historically to facilitate the process of slavery and indenture and child theft. And so what we're going to look at in part 2 is the crime of being born and giving birth. And so we're going to look at this interplay between this idea of race, the law, and religion in America. Knowledge is power, but remember, wisdom and understanding are even better.
While you slept, the promise was unkept, but your faith was as sure as the stars. Now you're free, and the world has come to see just how proud and beautiful